What's going on, everybody? Chris Kennedy here with drroto.com. We have a great Thursday night matchup for you this evening. We have the Steelers and the Browns, a divisional matchup here in the AFC North. And while it may not be the most high-scoring game, there are some props that I really do like for tonight's matchup. So let's try to get into those as quickly as we can. First, a little recap on last week. We started off really hot for Thursday night and then Sunday's games. Monday Night Football, unfortunately, was not very kind to us. Went 1 of 6 on those plays, bringing us to 50% hit rate on the week. For the season, though, we are at 58%. So as long as we can stay at 60 and above, we're going to see a lot of green and we're going to see a lot of these props hit. All right. Another thing about this game is there is going to be a little bit of wind. They're saying maybe 20 to 25 miles an hour. Unfortunately, it shouldn't really affect that much as far as these numbers are concerned. It could affect the kicking game a little bit, but neither of these quarterbacks like to stretch the field too much, so I don't think the passing work is going to be affected as much as it could be. Now, first prop of the evening that we like is going to be Mitch Trubisky, all right? He's got a number of 191.5 passing yards. I'm taking more here. So far this year, the Browns have allowed just about over 500 total passing yards, including over 300 to Joe Flacco. So I think if they can give that much to Joe Flacco, I think Mitch Trubisky should be able to hit this prop of 191.5 passing yards. Next one here, sticking with the Steelers, kicker Chris Boswell. I mentioned the wind earlier, but I think he's going to get a lot of opportunities for in the kicking game, and his prop right now for fantasy points is 6.5. I like the more there. He's hit 13 and 8 fantasy points in each of his first 2 games. And again, while the win could be an issue, I think that the opportunities will kind of outweigh everything else. So I like more on 6.5 fantasy points for Chris Boswell. Next one here is going to be a defensive prop. John Johnson of the Browns, 4.5 tackles and assists. I like more on this option here because he's only missed this prop once since week 11 going back to last season. I do think Pittsburgh is going to continue to throw the ball, which means Johnson, their safety, should be able to rack up the tackles. Next one here I like is Jacoby Brissette, 9.5 rushing yards. He's hit this in both games this year so far. He's averaging 5 rushing attempts per game. And while Pittsburgh doesn't necessarily generate a lot of a pass rush, I do think that they're going to generate enough to where he'll have to move out of the pocket and get some scrambling yards because the Browns do allow a good pressure rate to opposing defensive lines. Next one here, and the final prop of the evening, kind of goes hand in hand with Jacoby Brissette, but the Steelers' defensive unit here, 2.5 sacks. I'm taking less on this number here. The Browns have allowed just 1 sack per game so far this season. No TJ Watt for the Steelers. They weren't able to sack Mac Jones last week. And the Pittsburgh defensive line, as I mentioned earlier, does generate the 3rd lowest pressure rate of all teams in the NFL so far this year. Now, granted, the Browns do allow a high pass rate number there, but with Brissette only getting sacked 1 in each of his last 2 games here this season, I do think Brissett's scrambling ability he'll be able to avoid and kind of evade those tackles for the sacks. So less 2.5 sacks for the Steelers defense. That's all I've got for these Thursday night games. Let's get into it again in just a couple of days so we can talk about Sunday's matchups. Make sure you guys are liking the video here on YouTube. Make sure you're subscribing. Also, you can follow me on Twitter at Vineyard Remedy. Be sure to ask any questions that you guys may have, and we will talk with you in a couple days for Sunday's slate. So for drroto.com, I am Chris Kennedy, and hope you guys hit